Morning, everybody. Welcome and happy International Women's Day. We are honored to have our special presentation today on International Women's Day. Although we had to miss the big event inside UN, but what can you do? This is the scheduling that we get from the CSW NGO organizing committee. And my name is Beth Dagan, and I have been coming to CSW for the past 28 years in Beijing. I haven't missed even one, except 2 years for COVID. But I'm so happy and we learn from each other. In 2009, after I returned from one of my CSW trips, I started to think about the idea of finding a new nonprofit, new NGOs, in order just to amplify voice and say a few words about our community in North Carolina. We have a 6-minute video clip about WomenNC, its program, the money from the students, then we continue. Thank you so much for being here.
Poverty and lack that's women's rights. Challenges every day. One Carolina resident, Beth Dagan, recognized an opportunity to make our community issues. Since its inception in 2009, advocacy and programs have influenced over 20,000 change agents, including legislators, and the community at large, through annual seminars, workshops, events, personal meetings, and panel discussions in Carolina, and at the United Nations Annual Global Meeting on the Status of Women. WomenNC's advocacy has played an active role in women's access to health, of violence, food trafficking, elimination of food insecurity, protection from domestic violence and sexual abuse, and all other forms of injustices against women, as outlined in the United Nations Convention to Eliminate All Forms of Discrimination against Women, or CEDAW. Specific examples include WomenNC participation in passage of North Carolina's Senate Bill 63, also known safe harbor victims of human trafficking, the Act, and ongoing advocacy for ratification of CSW by the U.S. Senate and cities for CSW. Believing in the importance of the next generation of leaders, the WomenNC Commission on the Status of Women Fellowship Program leads a group of select college students to United Nations each year to present research projects and interact with world leaders. This one-of-a-kind signature program provides mentoring, leadership development, and networking, as well as a platform to bring global perspective back to our North Carolina communities, presenting key topics to over 200 people each February at the annual Local to Global Student Fellowship Dinner and Global to Local Observations each April following their United Nations experience.
Always been passionate about women's human rights, and this fellowship was just such a unique opportunity for students. I've never even heard of another opportunity like this for undergraduate students to travel to the UN and to present our research. I had to apply and see if I could participate.
This has really helped me a lot. It's given me a lot of confidence to go out there and actually do research and find resources and find the people that can help connect me to different resources. And it's also helped my presentation skills because we've done a lot of workshops on public speaking.
As an Egyptian American, I've seen how women are treated and how they're impacted on a global sphere. So I know exactly what needs to be done, and I know that there's so much that needs to be done.
Quite frankly, I would say that my research wouldn't exist if it weren't for WomenNC. So having the passion that I had for reproductive justice, brewing inside of me for years, but now having an outlet in which to go and research and have that support system.
I felt really alone in the field as college students, but now that I realize that there are so many men involved to eradicate violence against women and girls, I feel really strong about it, and I feel great. I'm very happy. This framework of violence against women and girls as women's issue is problematic because, like Jackson Katz, the author of Magic Paradise, it's not a issue that 99% of perpetrators are men.
Growing network, fellow alumni have gone on to become leaders in our community, serving on nonprofit and agency boards and committees, acting as a voice for this generation and furthering the progress of women's human rights in their communities across the United States and around the world.
Since the fellowship had the opportunity to work in Germany, a domestic violence service provider, and to conduct some independent research this past summer in India on infant violence in the north of India. The fellowship really gave outwork to step forward. For me, my experience with WomenNC as a fellow has resonated in every part of my life since then. I pursued international development work for women after I graduated from North Carolina State University, and I joined the U.S. Peace Corps, where I served for 27 months in Indonesia. And everything that I saw was through this lens of gender equality, and that's what I gained from WomenNC.
As our organization grows in size and impact, WomenNC continues to rely on volunteers and the generous support of individual donors and partners.
The community support the fellowship is providing resources, the opportunity otherwise, and that at my own school, I would have loved to have an opportunity like WomenNC, but my school simply didn't provide it. So to find a group of passionate people who are passionate about women's rights and dedicated to helping you develop skills necessary for advocacy really changed me.
Learn more about how you can be a part of our mission by visiting WomenNC.org. Together, we can raise a generation in North Carolina that honors women's human rights.
Thank you for watching. I need to add that this is a sort of old video for like 5 years ago. And as you know, as we move on, we keep progressing, we keep changing, using the language of more gender neutral. Instead of using the word fellowship, now we are using the word scholarship. We call our students scholars, not fellows. And we call our mentors mentors, not mentors. So I wanted just to make note of this older video. Okay, at this point, I would like just to say a few words about our environment, and then our speakers will start their presentation. You know, I think it is, as I mentioned in the video, there is a common denominator between all the issues that women are facing globally, no matter where we are. I have lived in Iran, in Middle East, in Canada, many parts of the United States, Europe. And no matter where we go, we see like gender disparity, we see violence against women, we see wage gap, we see lack of access to the proper healthcare facilities. We see all living in North Carolina, and I wanted just to do something tangible, to have leadership training program, and at the same time to improve the status of women in my community. I think this grassroots work has a very special value, as you all know. If we work in our own community, definitely it will make a big difference. And so North Carolina is for our international audience, is located in the southeastern part of the United States. North Carolina mostly is an agricultural. It's the 28th largest state in the United States, and with a population of 10 million people, and 22% African American and 10% are Latinos. So this is the environment of North Carolina, and we have excellent, prominent universities in North Carolina, such as NC Central, such as Shaw University, such as Bennett College, University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, NC State, North Carolina State University, and Duke University. And for our undergraduate students of this university, by collaborating with these universities, somehow they help a little bit financially to bring the students to this trip to the United Nations. And so today we have also we collaborate with the RTI International, which is a research institute. And yes, please raise your hand. And they play the mentorship role for our students as a volunteer, which is great, help them to conduct their research. Okay, without any more word, I would like to introduce our first speaker to the podium. She's going to mention her name, and she introduces herself. Okay.
So much, Beth. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolina Koch. I'm a senior at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I just reiterate Beth's sentiments, and also today presenting to a room full of change makers and focusing on farm worker protections in North Carolina for vulnerable populations that I define as female migrant farm workers. So an overview of my methodology in conducting this action-oriented literature review. This first step was to define my research question, which is how can sustainable agricultural practices improve the working conditions of migrant female farm workers in North Carolina? This issue is particularly important for me as a Latina, but also to amplify the voices and the lived experiences of female migrant farm workers in North Carolina, as they are a historically marginalized and silenced group for a variety of socioeconomic factors that I'm going to be touching on throughout this presentation. I'd also like to note that, however, I'm introducing this topic in a localized context of my own community in North Carolina. The implications of this study can go far beyond the local level in North Carolina into a national context and also an international context. So the next step in my literature review was to assess the literature, screen for inclusion, assess publicly available data and government documents, analyze this data, synthesize, and then why I'm here today, which is to present to you all the findings from this research and also to propose recommendations going into this policy sphere in agriculture in North Carolina. So today I'm going to be discussing my research Sustainable Development Goals as defined by the United Nations. We have number 5, gender equality, number 8, decent work and economic growth, and number 13, climate action. So as we begin to address some of these issues, I'd really draw your attention to 2 statistics in North Carolina. The first being North Carolina's economy in 2021 came from agriculture and agribusiness, accounted for 17% of jobs in North Carolina in 2020. And the second being that North Carolina ranks 6th in the nation for the number of migrant farm workers each growing season out of 50 states in North America. So we have over 150,000 migrant farm workers present in North Carolina each growing season, with 95% of whom are native Spanish speakers. So we know that the state is highly reliant on migrant labor, especially those of Latinx descent. This is opening grounds for exploitation due to a variety of socioeconomic factors that I'm going to be touching on throughout the rest of the presentation. But essentially, what is the issue? In North Carolina, an economy highly reliant on its agricultural industry, the mass production and processing of food and other agricultural products, utilizing pesticides and harmful chemicals and fertilizers, has left the state to cope with the effects of non-renewable fossil fuel and other harmful side effects to the industry. While the agricultural industry is taking a toll on the environment in North Carolina, it's also taking a toll on the laborers that are upholding our food system, something that we all benefit from. Agricultural laborers are facing both health and economic barriers. Health barriers include musculoskeletal and eye damage, pesticide exposure, heat illness, and respiratory illness. Economic barriers include lack of legal protections, risk of deportation, low wages, and poverty. So there's a disproportionate impact on women in this field. Women working in the agricultural industry are facing significant risk to both their physical health, but particularly their reproductive health. Pesticide exposure is negatively associated with both outcomes, health outcomes in adult women, but also developmental outcomes among their children. And long-term exposure to pesticides can lead to neurocognitive decline, pulmonary disease, cancer, and reproductive issues. So while I was conducting this research, I came across to 2007, examining pesticide-related illnesses and injuries in farm workers. And it found that female farm workers are twice as likely to experience an exposure-related illness or injury than men. So where do we go from here, especially moving into contexts where climate change is prioritized in our international agendas, but also at the local level and at the national level? The first recommendation that I have is introducing a participatory and a multi-stakeholder approach, both among farm workers and farm organizations, to prioritize farm workers having a seat at the table for consultation, to make sure that we're implementing accountability mechanisms and monitoring mechanisms to hold these big corporations accountable. This also means addressing and the reporting of grievances without the fear of repercussion. So promoting this multi-stakeholder participatory approach into both farm labor regulations and policies is going to help empower historically marginalized employees, but without the fear of repercussion. Prioritizing work organization, so enforcing more inclusive and safe policies in the workplace to help amplify the experience of migrant female farm workers, and also working to improve their occupational health outcomes. So cultivating supportive and safe environments through improved ergonomic policy designs for migrant agricultural workers, but especially women, is going to help improve the development outcomes of laborers as a whole population in the long term. And my last two recommendations on theme with this year's CSW of introducing and including technology in the solution. We have number one, which is integrated pest management. Integrated pest management, or IPM, has been identified as a way to increase agricultural profits while also prioritizing the protection of laborers in their working conditions and also their living conditions, making the whole agricultural industry more sustainable in the long term. And we also have digital health equities, so improving health outcomes through accessibility to digital health tools like telemedicine, and also increasing health literacy in rural areas. So utilizing agrotechnologies like integrated pest management and digital health equity to institute more sustainable approaches to agriculture not only works to preserve the environment, but also promotes the social protection of vulnerable populations like female farm workers. The results of this research provide insight into the lived experiences of farm workers upholding the food and agricultural system in North Carolina. However, like I said before, the implications of this study can go far beyond North Carolina, as the protection of farm worker rights is a global issue, and the improvements in one geography can be applicable to many others. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me via the contact information on my screen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shreya Kancharla, and I'm a junior majoring in political science at North Carolina State University. My intimate partner violence, or IP service, available to the South Asian community in Wake County, North Carolina. Before I begin, I want to offer a special thank you to WomenNC for giving me this opportunity to pursue this research. And I would like to thank my femtor, Manisha, who is here today, for helping me thoroughly throughout this research process. This is Sania Khan. Sania Khan was a Pakistani woman, a social worker, and an advocate for low-income families. She also had a passion for women's rights and worked to remove the stigma of divorce in South Asian communities, predominantly through social media platforms such as TikTok. Khan explained the shame and stigma she faced as a divorced South Asian woman. Because of her divorce, she was exiled by some of her family members for her actions. Unfortunately, on July 18, 2022, she was shot dead by her ex-husband, Raheel Ahmad. The news of Khan's death shocked the South Asian community and her TikTok followers. These events ignited conversations surrounding the stigma of divorce and domestic violence in South Asian culture. As we saw with Sania Khan's story, the South Asian community faces various cultural barriers, including abuse from other family members, stigma or shame, isolation, fear of divorce, and more. Additionally, South Asian culture is considered patriarchal, adhering to traditional gender roles in which men are seen as the primary decision makers and have much greater power than women. This graph displays the results of a study focusing on the indirect experience of domestic violence among South Asian immigrants in the United States, featuring both men and women. And it shows how prevalent domestic violence is in the South Asian community, with physical being the highest type of abuse. Domestic violence is prevalent in Wake County, North Carolina, shown in the most recent report detailing the number of clients Interact, a nonprofit that assists victims of domestic violence and sexual assault from Wake County. Interact served 5,739 clients from July 2020 to June 2021. Despite Interact not reporting the race of all of their clients, historically, South Asian women are less likely than women of other races to seek out services due to a lack of social support, according to a study conducted by researchers of Pakistan. Kieran is the only organization in Wake County that provides services and assistance for South Asian women. Kieran's mission is to break the cycle of abuse by providing culturally focused services and extensive economic, social, and community resources to serve South Asians who are victims of domestic violence in North Carolina. Significant outreach, with the entity serving 367 clients from Wake County in 2020 and 541 in 2021. Despite this effort, with Wake County having one of the biggest South Asian populations in North Carolina, Kieran's outreach might be improved if they had greater resources. My research explored how services for South Asian women in Wake County who have experienced intimate partner violence be. This research is particularly important to me because as a South Asian woman, I empathize with those, a part of my community, who have suffered at the hands of intimate partner violence and other forms of abuse. I hope with my research, I can offer them better services to give them the courage to leave any abusive relationship that they're in. I conducted research for this study through a literature review by using a systematic keyword search. I also carried out informational interviews with different South Asian domestic violence prevention organizations. I then offer recommendations that have the potential to improve the services provided to South Asian victims or survivors of IP. From my review, I discovered that many South Asian victims or survivors of IPV are not aware of the resources. And the outreach coordinator of Kieran expressed this to me as well, because many of Kieran's clients had wished they had heard about the organization too. One study I reviewed detailed the impact of technology and suggested that domestic violence service providers should promote the safe use of technology for victims or survivors of abuse, who could increase their ability to assist themselves and their children using information technology, because technology expands social networks, allows victims to seek outside help, and eventually allows them to leave their abusive relationship. The same study further explains that outreach can be accomplished by placing information about domestic violence in culturally specific locations that are frequently visited by the South Asian communities, such as grocery stores or places of worship. This all adds up to the importance that bystander training and education on healthy relationships is that religious organizations continue to be perceived as unhelpful in supporting South Asian victims or survivors of IPV, because however, religious organizations can do quite a lot to assist victims or survivors of IPV. For my research, I spoke with the Director of Outreach and Education of DIA, a South Asian specific domestic violence prevention organization located in Houston, Texas. The Director of Outreach and Education directed me toward two resources that focus on supporting faith leaders to prevent sexual and domestic violence. These include the Faith Trust Institute and a domestic violence guide created for faith leaders from New York. These resources explain that religious organizations can aid victims or survivors of IPV by sponsoring educational events about domestic and sexual violence, speaking out about domestic violence during meetings or sermons, and so much more. Providing all these resources can improve the safety of religious organizations for victims or survivors, as many are deeply connected to their faith. I have 2 recommendations based on my research. First, South Asian religious organizations in Wake County should be encouraged to host on domestic violence, healthy relationship dynamics, and bystander training. An educational event informing others about domestic violence and what a healthy relationship looks like. Encourage bystanders to look for signs of a potentially abusive relationship and understand how to properly help those who may be suffering at the hands of an unhealthy relationship. We should also request local South Asian-owned women-run beauty parlors or threading salons to share information about community resources with their clientele. As many South Asian women visit these salons, it would be beneficial to South Asian victims of IPV for these salons to display brochures or flyers with the resources. I would also like to mention that one of these religious events or educational events about domestic violence has happened already in Morrisville, in North Carolina, with the Hindu Society of North Carolina, and it really helped start that conversation in the South Asian community about domestic violence because it is so stigmatized in the South Asian community. And with that, I was asked to also present this in front of the Morrisville Town Council and the mayor, so hopefully more change can come about and really ignite these conversations. All in all, pushing forward bystander intervention and prevention methods will garner greater comfort and support for South Asian victims or survivors of IPV, giving them the courage to leave an abusive relationship. With the large South Asian population that exists in Wake County, it is not enough to be complacent. People from different racial backgrounds live under more strenuous circumstances than others, which can be seen in the South Asian community alone. Community-based outreach and cultural responsiveness are efficient ways to help people of different racial and cultural backgrounds. Change can happen with the right initiative. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Allison Riley and I'm a junior undergraduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I'm studying political science and social and economic justice. It's such an honor to be here at CSW67, surrounded by so many inspiring change makers who are working for gender equality around the world. I want to express my gratitude to WomenNC and my femtor Brittany Howard for giving me the opportunity to pursue this research and to share it with you all today. Yeah, absolutely. Would you feel comfortable if I took off my mask? Yeah, of course. So today I will be presenting my research on school-based restorative justice with a particular focus on how innovative anti-racist restorative practices can help to build community and support Black girls' education, both in North Carolina and beyond. So let's start by defining the issue. During the 2017 to 2018 academic year, students in North Carolina schools lost over 40,000 days of classroom instruction due to short-term suspension. And while this lost classroom time alone is staggering, the issue only begins there. Exclusionary discipline practices like suspensions and expulsion are correlated with several negative life outcomes, including poor attendance, reduced academic achievement, failure to graduate, increased juvenile justice involvement, and higher rates of adult incarceration. This use of punitive school discipline to funnel students out of classrooms and into the criminal legal system is commonly termed the school to prison pipeline. What my research aims to highlight is is that the school-to-prison pipeline is both a race and a gendered issue. Although the vast majority of research and advocacy around the school-to-prison pipeline focuses on boys of color, Black girls are currently the fastest growing population in the juvenile justice system. In fact, while Black boys are suspended 3 times more than white boys, Black girls are suspended at rates 6 times more than their white counterparts in North Carolina. Girls of color experience a unique set of stereotypes at the intersection of their identities, often leading them to be adultified or perceived as more mature and therefore more deserving of punishment than their peers. It is unsurprising then that we hear countless stories of girls of color feeling undervalued, unsupported, and out of place in the classroom. So how does this relate to this year's CSW theme? As you all know, the priority theme for the 67th Commission on the Status of Women is innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. My time at CSW this week has highlighted the concerning lack of representation of women in tech fields, especially women from marginalized racial and ethnic backgrounds. In the US, for example, although Black, Latinx, and Indigenous women are 20% of the population, they make up just 5% of today's tech workers. And these patterns start in the classroom, where my research has indicated that girls of color are frequently stereotyped, isolated, and excluded. That being said, schools also have historically been critical sites of innovation and empowerment. Restorative justice is just one innovative framework that can begin to transform school communities and empower girls of color to pursue the education that they deserve. So what is restorative justice? In my life, I have had the privilege of both witnessing and participating in restorative practices firsthand. Traveling to New Zealand, where I was able to study restorative justice in the university context, and participating myself in restorative justice circles when I have caused harm to others. What I think is most important to me to share about restorative justice is that it is much more than just a set of procedures or practices. It is a transformative framework that is rooted in Indigenous tradition from across the globe, prioritizing relationship, interdependency, fairness, shared decision-making, solidarity, and healing. One of the best ways, I think, to represent this mindset shift is with the questions listed here on the board. While a traditional punitive discipline system responds to conflict by asking what rule or law was broken, who broke it, and how should they be punished, restorative justice aims to center community, asking who has been harmed, what are their needs, and what can be done to both repair that harm and then prevent that harm from occurring again in the future. In the classroom context, 3 of the most common school-based restorative practices include restorative conversations, circle processes, and restorative conferences. So while I've personally had these positive experiences with restorative justice, for my research, I aim to take a more systematic approach to examining the impact of restorative justice initiatives that are currently being implemented in schools across the United States. To do so, I engaged in an action-oriented literature review, searching 2 education-focused databases in 4 stages shown here. I used increasingly specific search terms to ensure that I was taking an intersectional approach to my research, and I finished with 25 articles that I ultimately included for review. Based on this literature review, the preliminary evidence around restorative justice in schools supports several positive outcomes, including reductions in office discipline referrals, suspensions, and expulsions, building listening, anger management, and empathetic skills, improved social relationships with both peers and teachers, increased attendance and graduation rates, and in many cases, restorative justice demonstrated an opportunity to alleviate both actually exacerbated. So it was actually this finding that prompted me to identify some of the common barriers that were reported across the literature to be limiting the positive impact that restorative justice can and should be happening in schools across the US, especially for Black girls and other girls of color. The first is identity-blind restorative justice, which describes how restorative practices were often integrated into existing discipline systems using race-neutral or colorblind, or more broadly, identity-blind language. Without explicit training and awareness about the biases that they hold about their students, teachers were left poorly equipped to address the unique needs of different students from different marginalized identity groups. The next barrier, procedural versus school-wide restorative justice, describes how restorative justice initiatives often fell short if they were implemented in a procedural way without actually interrogating the previous discipline system and promoting a school-wide restorative trend shift. Without that school-wide culture shift, restorative justice can just become a checklist of practices that simply reinforces prior disparities. Another important factor for effective restorative justice implementation is teacher and administrator buy-in. It can be difficult for public school teachers in the United States who are already severely underpaid and overburdened to take on additional trainings and shoulder both the logistical and the emotional burden of coordinating restorative practices. Other teachers reported having deeply embedded beliefs about the traditional authority of educators that dissuaded them from trying on this new innovative approach to responding to student conflict in this behavior. Finally, several studies also reported a lack of funding to support the hiring of restorative justice coordinators, as well as to support other training and implementation materials. So that being said, although these barriers are significant, they are not insurmountable. And it does not mean that we should not continue to try to pursue restorative justice implemented in its best form. So with that in mind, I described 4 recommendations that I think can help to improve the implementation for school-based restorative practice. First, anti-racism and anti-bias training must be integrated into restorative justice training to ensure that restorative practices are not identity blind, but are intentionally identity aware. In addition, restorative practices can be used throughout the school year to intentionally affirm student identities and provide space for students to discuss personal experiences of microaggressions and trauma. It's also crucial that we focus on hiring and retaining culturally representative staff help build trust and reliability in the restorative justice process. Next, I recommend that all students, staff, and administrators participate in community building circles, both during student orientation and professional development, as a way to introduce these folks to the restorative process. For me, I've become so passionate about restorative justice because I've had these firsthand experiences participating in it myself. And I truly believe that having this proactive opportunity to experience restorative justice circles would be a great way to build that necessary buy-in among students. In my paper, I also outlined several grant opportunities that can be used to support the hiring of restorative practice coordinators, as well as to support training and facilitation materials. And I recommend some innovative data collection methods to ensure that school-based restorative practices are constantly being reevaluated and improved upon. For the advocacy component of my project, WomenNC, I've already been fortunate to connect with several teachers in Durham County, North Carolina, a school district in which their prior in-school suspension program was actually recently transformed into school restorative practice coordinators in every school in the district. So I'm really looking forward to continuing my advocacy in Durham County and thinking about ways my recommendations help to improve the implementation of their restorative practice centers. But this work does not have to be limited to North Carolina or even the United States. In my time studying restorative justice, I think what has been most compelling is that this framework applies in so many different fields and cultural contexts, ranging from education, of course, but also in healthcare, criminal justice, and so much more. Personally, restorative justice and shifting those questions that you ask when conflict occurs has deeply influenced my approach to leadership, to relationship building, to conflict resolution. And so while alleviating gender and racial discipline gaps is just one application of restorative justice, I encourage you all to think about ways that this framework applies in your own settings, in your own community, and in your own areas of action. Thank you all so much for your time and for listening. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Contact information here. I also have cards to hand out later. Appreciate you all so much for your time. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Happy International Women's Day. My name is Leo Wilcoxon, and I'm an accelerated bachelor's master's student at North Carolina State University. I want to share a little bit about myself and my motivations before I share with you my research project. I have been passionate about improving our global communities since the commencement of my undergraduate and throughout my graduate career. I began studying international business before beginning to study global studies at Arizona State University. It wasn't until 2019 and 2020, when I was studying in Aix-en-Provence, France, that I felt truly connected to international development and global health, which is my current program. In 2020, and at the onset of COVID-19, my friend, a woman, was cautioned by a primary care physician at her health cabinet, though the only OBGYN who could confirm her diagnosis was booked out a month ahead in a city of approximately 76,000 women. I watched and supported her through a mentally and physically burdensome time, where she was caught in an onslaught of her own personal fears and during the outbreak of COVID-19. The lack of support that she and other women received in a country renowned for its healthcare became a transparent call for action to me to pursue a career researching and supporting women's health equity on global platforms. Since then, I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with nonprofits and institutes for research across the world to support women and girls globally, including the Gambia Girl Power, which is a nonprofit working to improve the status of education for girls in the Gambia. We use technology to connect to educational resources and create a bridge between the girls in the Gambia and our school at North Carolina State University. Additionally, social media has served to connect us with groups who have created lesson plans for empowering girls and lessons of self-love and other virtues of our nonprofit. Recently, I've had the privilege of working with RTR International's WomenNC Scholar program under the director of my femtor, Melissa Dunn, to prepare this research question for you. I've been incredibly grateful to be a part of CSW67 and to learn from all of the brilliant minds that we have here this week. Today, I want to talk to you about this research. If rural counties focus on women's healthcare, will there be less brain drain? Brain drain is a problem impacting rural communities when educated individuals pursue economic opportunities in larger, more urban areas. Local communities often attempt to mitigate this challenge by prioritizing economic incentives solely. However, women's health in many rural areas, including North Carolina, are often lacking, and economic incentives fall short of targeting this crucial population. Without public health support in rural areas, women are less likely to pursue a livelihood there. This transparent need to understand the public health systems in rural North Carolina became the focus for my research supported by WomenNC. Do public health systems support the health needs of educated women with a bachelor's degree or higher to work and stay in rural areas? As you can see here, I used a combination of a literature review and publicly available data to target 5 randomly selected counties in North Carolina, including Robeson, Moore, Avery, Dare, and Gaston County, which were selected to represent each geographic region in North Carolina. In my literature review, I found that globally financial returns increased by 15% when gender diversity was included in the workplace, which suggests that there is a strong economic appeal to encouraging educated women to work in rural areas. Additionally, women's health improves in a rural study. When women's health improves in a rural study, community health increased as a whole. But for North Carolina, rural counties had the lowest rankings for women's health and wellness. Women in North Carolina were also less likely to have attained an educational degree. Importantly, women who were educated were more likely to travel to receive specialized care, indicating that women do desire better healthcare access and understand the consequences of lacking healthcare infrastructure. As a result, I have provided my recommendations for developing robust women's health programs that are accessible and attainable and cater to the specific needs of the community. I also suggest incentivizing clinics to provide specialty care to locate their clinics in rural and accessible locations, creating a balance between specialized care and primary care.
Finally, public health codes and regulations should be prepared to support women in achieving and sustaining personal and independent health insurance. Establishing these changes and following through on their developments will create a sustainable network of growth for women and for rural counties in North Carolina. That is all I have for you today. Thank you for your time, and please do feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'm looking forward to creating a stronger network of empowered women. And so thank you again.
They are wonderful, aren't they? They have worked for 9 months for this research and this presentation. At this point, I'd like to thank our presenter here and invite our new group of our presenters. Let me join me.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today, and happy International Women's Day. My name is Tessa Delgo. I am a senior at Duke University. I wanted to start off by thanking everyone at WomenNC, especially my femtor, Dr. Kathy Batts, for this amazing opportunity and for supporting this research. My research has focused on ways to best support single mothers who are attending community colleges in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, which is where most of our universities are located, in overcoming barriers to meeting their education. I personally was raised by a single mother who I saw go in and out of school throughout my life without completing her degree. And as I've grown up and in pursuing this research, I've realized that many of the issues that she and other single mothers face in their educational journeys are systemic, but also fixable. So this project is really dedicated to her and all mothers across the globe who are working for better lives for their families. Just to give some context for this issue, there are a lot of single mother students in the United States, but not a lot of single mother students are graduating. Nearly 10% of all undergraduate students in the United States are single mothers, and that is a figure that is only continuing to increase. But only 33% of college students with children are expected to graduate within 6 years of enrollment. Only 30% of single mothers in the United States have earned a degree at the associate level or higher. 28% of single mothers have some college education, but no degree, which makes them more likely than all other women to have started but not finished. Single mother students getting their degree has significant positive impact not only on these women and their families, but on the nation as a whole. 9 in 10 single mothers who are pursuing a college degree have incomes at or near the federal poverty line. However, each additional level of education earned by a single mother is associated with lower poverty rates. Additionally, children of single mothers who have a degree are significantly more likely to go on to earn degrees. Beyond that, researchers found that the cohort of single mothers enrolled in college during a single academic year, when compared to single mothers with only high school credentials, was expected to contribute $6 billion more in taxes and save almost $20 billion in public assistance spending over their lifetime. But why this issue should matter to us here in this room is because this is a fixable problem. As these researchers found, predictors of success among single-parent students are not invariant personal characteristics, but rather appear to be behaviors well within the scope of influences of programs that can be created by institutions, nonprofits, scholarship funders, and more. Probably a lot of people. That said, my project has been to find what programs we in North Carolina can implement to best support single mother students in our state. To do this, I conducted an action-oriented literature review with the goal of identifying both common barriers that single mothers face while attending community colleges and existing programs that have been implemented or at least proposed to combat these barriers in other regions. Across the literature in my review, there were a few challenges that were common to single mother students nationwide. These were financial constraints, including struggling to access student financial aid, time constraints when balancing family life with jobs and schoolwork, lacking accessible and affordable high-quality childcare, and lacking a sense of community and belonging on their. In recent years, there has been a greater push from institutions to support student parents. Most often, these supports have taken the form of specific financial aid sources, including scholarships and guaranteed income programs, offering on-campus childcare and/or childcare subsidies, implementing specialized community supports on campus, and piloting data tracking efforts meant to identify the existence of this often overlooked population on campuses, as much of the current research on student parents is not disaggregated to look at single mothers. Something that felt really important to me in developing my recommendations was being thoughtful and intentional in the implementation of solutions, rather than putting a Band-Aid over bullet holes. As these researchers identified, single unit solutions targeted at student parents. So, for example, establishing a child care center on campus with no other support discounts the complex identities of student parents and the importance of addressing their unique. With that said, my recommendations for Triangle area community colleges are components of a holistic initiative to best support single mother students. These include piloting a disaggregated data collection program targeted at identifying single mother students on our campuses in order to demonstrate a need for more support, establishing school-based guaranteed income pilots for single mother students to support their financial needs, making improvements to existing child care programs on campuses, and hiring single mother navigators, student support staff who are specifically trained to support single mothers in their complex needs. Thank you all again so much for being here. My full research paper is available on the WomenNC website, and if there's any questions, I've included my contact information here, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kalia Jones, and I actually just finished my undergraduate degree at North Carolina State University in December and enrolled right into the graduate program studying biomedical and health informatics. So I've always had a passion for reproductive health and in general just reproductive justice and education. So when I learned about pregnancy centers, I'll tell you more about it in a second, and how they sometimes spread misinformation, it made me really distraught that we don't even have a framework for teaching people correct information, and then organizations were actively spreading misinformation. So that was my passion and my degree made me choose this topic. So I'm very excited today to tell you about my research on crisis pregnancy centers in Wake County, North Carolina, which is the county with the capital of North Carolina, and whether or not they're causing harm to women with low health first. Okay, so I would like to start my presentation with the story of two different patients. So this story begins after both patients have visited a crisis pregnancy center website, like the one and my doctor. So in our first story, there's a patient, I'm going to call her Jane. She has an unintended pregnancy and needs a place to go for counseling and to confirm that she's pregnant. At first, when she arrives at the crisis pregnancy, staff are very next to her. However, she brings up the option of potentially terminating the pregnancy. Their demeanor changes. They start to give her misinformation on abortion, such as that it causes breast cancer and infertility. They also insist on performing an ultrasound on her and using words such as baby and mom. At the end, Jane leaves the appointment feeling more confused and scared than when she arrived. So in our second case, patient, let's call her Clara, has been trying and struggling to get pregnant for over a year. However, she's finally pregnant in 3 months. So she can't afford prenatal testing. So she goes to a crisis pregnancy center because they offer free ultrasounds and resources. Again, the staff are very enthusiastic for her to be pregnant. However, when she goes and does an ultrasound with the crisis pregnancy center's volunteer, she says that she cannot find it and that Clara must have had a miscarriage. This causes Clara extreme distress, and she runs to the emergency room to get a second opinion and make sure that she's okay. After waiting for hours and incurring a massive bill, she's told that her pregnancy is actually okay and everything is fine and viable, and the person at the pregnancy center just misinterpreted. So these stories, among many others, inspire me to pursue research on crisis pregnancy centers and how we can hopefully mitigate their misinformation. So my research consisted of three main components: a literature review, a law review for North Carolina legislation, and then a website review of the crisis pregnancy centers within Wake County. And together, these helped me create my recommendations. So the literature review was very informative and kind of helping me understand the landscape of crisis pregnancy centers within legislation in the United States. And oftentimes, other states have tried to legislate against the misinformation spread by crisis pregnancy centers, but courts strike these legislations down on the grounds of protecting the free speech of crisis pregnancy centers. And then the literature review was also very helpful in helping me understand what exactly CPCOs are and what they do. So in 2021, crisis pregnancy centers outnumbered abortion providers in the United States 3-1. However, since our recent overturn of Roe and the strict anti-abortion legislations enacted since then, this number has probably risen drastically. In short, crisis pregnancy centers typically offer free pregnancy testing and ultrasounds in exchange for giving patients biased and often medically inaccurate information on concepts or on issues such as contraception and abortion. In fact, many CPCs actually use keywords to come up on Google when patients search for an abortion provider, even though they typically do not provide any abortion services or abortion referrals, nor contraceptives or contraceptives. So the second part of my research was actually a law review of the North Carolina legislature in 2021, directly after the fall of Roe. So in short, there were 7 laws proposed that involved abortion. So 3 were actually meant to protect abortion access, which is really good. However, 4 were actually aimed to prevent access to abortion. One of the most notable ones was actually a law that required physicians who perform abortion to endorse abortion reversal. Any medical organizations such as the American Medical Association or the American College of Gynecology and Obstetrics. So not very great. So the next part of my research was a website content review of crisis pregnancy centers in Wake County. As I said, Wake County includes the capital of North Carolina and is actually one of the largest counties in the state. I also chose this because it was one of the counties that actually had both abortion providers and crisis pregnancy centers. So a notable thing is, as I mentioned earlier, how that number between abortion providers and crisis pregnancy centers would rise. This has already happened in Wake County. At the beginning of my research, there were 6 crisis pregnancy centers and 3 abortion providers. Now there are 7 crisis pregnancy centers. So we have increased the number of crisis pregnancy centers. So the results of my website analysis were very informative. First of all, 50% of the crisis pregnancy centers in Wake County were actually listed in North Carolina's Pregnancy Resource Directory. So this is an official government document that is endorsing crisis pregnancy centers. So in addition, all of the crisis pregnancy centers provided ultrasounds and pregnancy testing, but none of them provided vital services such as contraception, referral, or abortion. And then, as you can see in the blue box, all of the crisis pregnancy centers in Wake County also provided misinformation on various topics, including abortion and contraception, especially emergency contraception. So I have 2 recommendations to fix this issue. So the first, as I mentioned, half of the crisis pregnancy centers in Wake County were in the Pregnancy Resource Directory. However, this directory does not include private comprehensive health clinics or abortion providers. So a simple and feasible fix would simply be including other providers that actually do provide abortion in that directory, just so that there is a more unbiased approach for people and they have every option available to them when they are faced with. And then my second recommendation for change actually ties back into the stories of Jane. They would both had a better experience if crisis pregnancy centers were not allowed to allow untrained volunteers to run ultrasound machines. In the case of Clara, she wouldn't have been mistakenly told that she had a miscarriage. And in the case of Jane, it would not be weaponized against her and her choices. So we could easily fix this simply by requiring sonographers in North Carolina or even just in Wake County to have a certification that they display in their place of work. So not only would this decrease the instances of crisis pregnancy centers misusing ultrasounds, but it could also increase the pay of sonographers. So it should be a pretty good solution. And so thank you so much for your time. I also have business cards. If you would like to talk to me afterwards, that would be great. And you can also scan this QR code to go to the WomenNC website and see all of our wonderful research. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I am Talia Chavis. I'm a junior studying public health education at North Carolina Central University. I want to first thank WomenNC for giving me this special opportunity to present my research on an international platform. And specifically, I want to thank my amazing mentor, Ms. Anna Varela, for her guidance and patience as I go through this research process. And also, I want to thank my amazing family, my cousin who's here with me today, my amazing family for watching online. My research topic is addressing health disparities to Black women in leadership, be part of the solution. So first, I want to start by saying that healthcare is the cornerstone of society. It is something that everyone needs, and everyone is entitled to. It is a basic human right. However, when this quote was made by Dr. Martin Luther King, this was about over 50 years ago, and there are still many injustices in healthcare that people are facing today. According to the Healthy North Carolina 2030 report, it clearly states that structural racism is the root cause behind healthcare disparities in populations of color. This includes public policies, institutional practices, and social norms. For instance, the racial wealth gap was created through the Federal Housing Authority, redlining. This put Black people in the category of being high risk in regards to obtaining mortgages for their homes. Unlike their white counterparts, they could not purchase homes in healthy communities, obtain a decent education, or get a job that pays a fair wage. More often than not, Black women in healthcare serve as certified nursing assistants or home health aides, which are often in long-term care facilities. These jobs earn a low wage with minimal benefits. Historically, slavery put Black women in similar roles in domesticated positions. And in 2019, the Census Bureau found that on average, the Black median household income was $43,000, while the average white median household income was $71,000. Between 2011 and 2015, minority representation in these roles was just under 20%. This includes all minority groups and men and women. However, as stated before, the Black population in North Carolina is around 22%. As we all know, one of the biggest health issues in the Black community in the United States is the maternal mortality rate. Studies found that no matter what their socioeconomic status was, Black women still fared worse than any other racial group. For instance, we can take world-renowned tennis player Serena Williams, who shared her story of not being heard by her medical team after the delivery of her daughter. A simple look at her medical history would have indicated a risk for blood clots. If she had not advocated for herself and forced them to give her a test for blood clots, she would have suffered a pulmonary embolism and not been able to see her beautiful daughter grow up. For my methodology, I included 26 sources. However, I used 7 peer-reviewed journal articles. And for my findings, I found that there are many barriers that Black women face in the workplace. There are stereotypes, a lack of mentors, and a lack of advancement opportunities. Some stereotypes that were faced by Black women were being the mad Black woman, the self-sacrificing mammy, or the bossy independent Black woman. Other words were also used, such as being aggressive, combative, or not being a team player. The media has added fuel to the fire by broadcasting Black women to fit these stereotypes, which is not realistic. A lack of mentors is unique because there are already so few African American women who hold these leadership positions. There are even few other people who are willing to mentor this next generation of leaders. There must be people who are willing to help the next generation engage in mentorship. White men have always had multiple seats at the table, and they do not view women and minorities as being capable of executive leadership. Women in general are overlooked for advancement opportunities. However, African American women face the concrete ceiling because of their race and their gender. Many do not know where to turn when feeling isolated or having their every move questioned. This concerns me because many Black women are overlooked for leadership because of their outward appearance. There is no consideration to what she has up here. Also in my findings, I looked at the 6 major healthcare systems in North Carolina, and I found that out of these 6, only 1 was led by an African American woman. For the visual purposes, I included 3 major healthcare systems in the Triangle area of North Carolina. I included UNC Health at the top as a picture of their CEO, who is a white man, and the only minority that serves on their leadership team, which is an African American woman. I also included Duke's healthcare system, which is a better representation of the diversity that North Carolina has. Lastly, I also included WakeMed, and as we can see, there are only 2 minorities who serve on their leadership team, and they're both African American women. Also, the Healthy North Carolina 2030 report states that lower income families had a greater chance of living in communities with schools that didn't have enough resources to send their students to college. Also, the North Carolina Healthcare Association created the Diverse Healthcare Leaders Mentorship Program for the purpose of sharing knowledge and experience with outstanding leaders in underrepresented communities while fostering professional development, mentorship, and networking, all of which are tools that are essential to navigating corporate America and being an excellent leader. And for my recommendations, I included 3 recommendations on how we can solve this issue. Increasing scholarships and grants to target Black women furthering their education in healthcare. Creating more mentorship programs to help Black women navigate the progression of their careers, and also expanding opportunities to gain healthcare administration experience in healthcare administration while completing their education. This topic is important to me because I am a Black woman. I am a Black woman who will be going in this field if I want to make change for my peers, for my family, who are also Black women. In regards to innovation, I chose not to take a technological approach at innovation. However, I do view innovation as a new idea. And a new idea that I advocate for is more minorities, more Black women in these leadership roles to make decisions for us. That's all that I have for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me using my information on the slide. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for making it to the end of all these amazing presentations. My name is Mia Miranda, and I am a senior at Duke University studying English and psychology. I am a first-generation American and a first-generation college student, and my mom starts crying every time she talks about me graduating, or even the fact that I am standing here in front of you all today. I would not be here today if it were not for her and the women who raised me, my grandmother and my aunts, all of whom are Cuban refugees. I have always maintained that being raised by these strong women is the reason that I am where I am today, and it shaped the way I view the world and how I see myself in it. It also meant that I know quite intimately the issues that are faced by the Latina immigrant community all over the United States, and more broadly, migrant and refugee women across the globe. In my research, I aim to explore the sexual and reproductive health issues faced by Latina immigrants in Durham, North Carolina, and what can be done not only to increase health outcomes, but to empower and work with this community. More precisely, I focus on how we can increase the sexual and reproductive health literacy. In my research, I aim to explore the sexual and reproductive health issues faced by Latina immigrants in North Carolina. Durham County has one of the largest Latino communities in North Carolina, with a population about 45,000. Of this population, about 8,700 are Latina immigrant adult women. This group meets unique challenges due to the intersection of their race, sex, and migrant status. One pressing and relevant issue is sexual and reproductive health, or the SRH, of this group, where Latinos face a multitude of inequalities and negative health outcomes due to systemic barriers to comprehensive sex education and services. In order to increase positive SRH outcomes, women must not only have access to the tools and knowledge, but understand how to use them, especially within their socio-cultural context. This is why I focused on health literacy as opposed to just health education, as it includes having accurate knowledge and feeling empowered on how to use this information in order to maintain positive health outcomes. To learn more about SRH outcomes and health literacy, I conducted an action-oriented literature review. My approach is community-centered, orienting both my research and consequent recommendations in the Latino community. I also focus on adult immigrant women because most of the research on SRH education focuses on adolescents. There's a big gap when it comes to adult women that I can do. Findings from my literature review reveal that Latina women are disproportionately at risk for poor SRH outcomes. These inequalities are even more stark for Latina immigrants, especially those who are undocumented. Across the US, rates of HIV are 4 times higher for Latinas than for white women, and rates of other STIs are more than double. Across all races and ethnic groups, Latina women have the highest rates of developing cervical cancer and the second highest mortality rate. In Durham, Latinas have significantly higher rates of pregnancy and infant mortality than all other races and ethnicities. Latina immigrants are also at an increased risk for unplanned pregnancies, reproductive coercion, intimate partner violence, and sexual trauma. Moreover, I found that Latina immigrants have a significantly higher number of misconceptions about pregnancy risk than any other group. Latinas have limited health-related knowledge, including knowledge about SRH services, STDs, and pregnancy prevention. Findings also show a connection between low health literacy levels and health outcomes. For example, women with low health literacy levels were 4 times more likely to not know when a woman could get pregnant during her menstrual cycle. SRH literacy is also associated with prenatal vitamin use, breastfeeding, postpartum depression, contraception use, and unplanned pregnancy. Some of the factors contributing to low SRH in this group are language barriers, misogyny or machismo, immigration status, sociocultural beliefs, and stigma. My review culminated in many vital assets to effective SRH literacy programs. They must, 1, be interactive and community-centered, be comprehensive, rooted in feminist theory, and encompass such topics as sexual and bodily autonomy and empowerment, cater to the specific obstacles that immigrant women face, including those, and especially those that are undocumented, and be available in a hybrid format that allows women to choose a program that best suits their schedules and needs. This digital component is especially important when we talk about SRH interventions for Latina immigrants, as the rates of Latinos using the internet are rising and continue to rise. Interventions that should thus include instructions on how to effectively find quality information, give out usable online resources, and teach effective searching strategies. Online programming is also efficient, lower in cost, includes higher user interactivity, and may be better able to reach Spanish speakers. I also found some community services for Latinas in North Carolina in use, including the reproductive justice at El Pueblo in Wake County and in Durham and San Trifano. Leadership at its centro informed me that they are currently working on developing a women's initiative to support group, and we're open to hearing my ideas about including SRH education into this initiative. Additionally, Durham Public Health offers women's health services, including maternal health clinic, family planning program, and breast and cervical cancer services. Taking these current services available into account, as well as the information gathered in my literature review, I propose the two following recommendations. One, that Durham Public Health work with its Centro Hispano to create a sexual and reproductive health literacy program. This program would integrate sexual and reproductive health literacy into a women's community group at its centro, using evidence-based feminist curriculum that promotes community building, women's empowerment, and comprehensive sexual and reproductive health education and literacy in a digital and hybrid format. And two, that Durham County provide funding to the Public Health Department for initiatives focused on increasing SRH literacy in the Latina immigrant community. This funding would go towards facilitating and supporting the SRH health literacy program in Durham Public Health, expand women's health services, and providing educational materials in Spanish on where to receive services and what to expect to receive. Funding should also focus heavily on expanding online resources which are becoming essential to women and girls in North Carolina and across the globe. Thank you, and thank you for attending all of the recommendations.
Almost at 12 o'clock. We have 5 minutes for some burning questions, and then our students will be in the hallway. So we want to make the room ready for the next group. And if you have a question, and also the research topics are posted on WomenNC's website. If you have any questions, we have 5 minutes at this. Please.
Thank you, and my name is Hendricks. I come from Zambia, East Africa. I'm a lawyer by profession. I think that my comment is just a question to the effect that I undertake matters relative to land rights, women. I think that is a big challenge in our country. And this has an effect from the economic perspective and all other rights relative to women's empowerment. And I think my takeaway from this is that because I represent rural women, and the challenge I have as a lawyer is that I will represent one client pro bono. Once I leave, I go back to my home, the issues are not resolved. And my takeaway from here is to encourage women in the rural settings to come up in groups and teach each other the rights, that they have the right to land. If your husband divorces you, you have the right 50% of the land. And that is a problem that our country has. If your father dies, you have the right to land, and not only the men. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, I was surprised to hear that the crisis pregnancy centers, that there are 3 times more of them in North Carolina than abortion centers. So I just wondered, has that percentage changed with the decision of the Supreme Court against abortion? Are there, probably the only thing now there are the crisis pregnancy centers to inform young women about their options. Is that right?
Yes. So actually, it's 3 times across the United States.
Oh,
and it varies by state. So some have numbers as high as 19, which is incredible and very dangerous. This especially affects rural communities where oftentimes a crisis pregnancy center may be the only place that they can get information. So it really depends based upon communities, but in short, yes, the decision definitely has legitimate education.
talk, we like to say, talking to the city council. To eradicate the